students that I've worked with in mostly in New York more than in California, because I think he's simply just better known in New York than in California. But I think they are initially alienated by the work because they're not sure how to read it, and they think it looks like all that other Enzo Cucci. I mean, he just visually gets lumped with the 80s, which is for them now is kind of ancient history, and why I know why do we don't even make it, they don't want to make canvases anymore. I mean, there's all kinds of youthful transitions out of traditional media and so forth. But for those people who are interested in painting and who are willing to just pause and hear someone talk about what's happening in the work, then they actually get pretty inspired to think about process as well as sort of the layering effect of the work. And a lot of them get inspired linguistically too by the work. The way, as you were talking about, just how these two different semiotic systems, language and the visual, can play off each other. And they might not repeat the work then formally, but they might take some of those ideas and push them a little bit, and not be afraid to think about that as a kind of material to play with.
Yeah, I think I would have to agree, and I think it's not just, one thing that's striking to me is it's not just young painters, but young musicians, young poets, right, that's kind of find these different points of entry into the work that's really fascinating. And I think, he's just become this sort of pop culture icon, right? I mean, you can buy T-shirts, right, with his works on them at Uniqlo. So I think that, he always has this kind of double life, right, as sort of this serious artist, but then also sort of he's become this product, right, this commercial product in a very sort of obvious way, right, Swatch watches and like Reeboks. And and I think that in many ways he sort of carries forward that tradition of Warhol. And I think one thing that has not yet been really discussed or analyzed is that, yes, he's taking appropriation, and yes, he's doing these things, but I think one way that he does sort of align with Bearden is that he actually is not just copying other artists, he begins to copy his copies of other artists, right? And so copying himself, I think, is a really interesting sort of take that it's a path that he goes down in a way that, certainly has connections to what Bearden's doing with photostats of his own work, but really come into play quite clearly with his use of Xerox in the 80s and sort of the abilities of the technology to quickly reproduce in a way that Rauschenberg could not have done or Warhol could not have done with silkscreen.